Hello, I'm Imara Jones, host of The Last Sip on FSTV, but today I'm at the Netroots Nation Gathering and Conference to talk to people, whether or not it be politicians or activists or the leaders of community-based organizations, about the way in which change is happening in this moment. And we are thrilled to be joined by a massive change agent, Mayor Chokwe Lumumba, the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with you, excited to really offer what we're doing in Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you too, because I think one of the things that we need in this moment are examples, right? Ways in which we can try to build a better society that's more equitable and the institutions that can do that. And one of the things is that you're doing that in Jackson. So I'm wondering if you can just start us out by talking about the major ways that you're doing that, whether or not it be community-based budgeting,
Yes.
whether or not it be your emphasis on economic cooperatives. I mean, take us through what you see as major problems and how the things that you're creating address that from the ground up.
Well, we're really excited about this moment, and the citizens of Jackson decided to vote on an unapologetically progressive platform. And that speaks more to the readiness of the people than anything else. And so in that, one thing that we assert is that the issues that we see not only in Jackson but across the nation are issues that circulate around the issue of self-determination, the issues that communities are typically not empowered to see the changes that they most desire. And so the ideas that we espouse are all centered around the premise of self-determination. When you talk about economic development, when you look at the trends of divestment in communities, we have to figure out how we start investing in ourselves. Most people don't see the value in what you're building until you build it yourself. And so we believe that where we are going in the city of Jackson demonstrates that we're prepared to fill our voids. We're prepared to move on a progressive agenda that does so. And so when we look at community budgeting, when we look at taking advantage of how we give community more voice, we feel that that is an important part of that equation. Moving away from models where we find value in what we're funding to a model where we fund what we collectively value.
So can you talk about, so you decided that the primary problem is underinvestment in communities. What are the ways in which you are addressing that, and how does that go to the fundamental problem? So specifically, how you're doing that?
Well, specifically what we're doing is promoting and trying to fund startup for cooperative businesses. And it's not necessarily an original idea. And you look at the history and the work of people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who organized poor farmers in the Mississippi Delta. It's just a reassertion of those same principles, those same ideas, and understanding that cooperative businesses are not a foreign concept in this country. It's something that we're seeing an expansion of, and it's not a foreign concept in the world. And so how do we utilize that to, accommodate our growing needs and our growing concerns? And identifying that cooperative businesses can be just about anything we want them to be. If we have infrastructure issues, for instance, in Jackson, then we can look at the introduction of a cooperative construction company. In a city of 178,000 people that doesn't have its own movie theater, why don't we build our cooperative movie theater that accomplishes our entertainment needs? And so it's the idea and the focus of a solidarity economy, an economy that looks to create dignity, move away from cycles of humiliation, cycles where we see divestment in our communities, where we see blighted homes, where we see poor performing education systems, and taking control of that for ourselves. How do we move people from being the governed to the governors?
So the solidarity economy, which you're talking about, cooperatives at the heart of that. Cooperatives, one, are worker-owned, right, enterprises. And secondly, they're enterprises that essentially take the profit out of it, that would give a certain amount of profit to a small group of people. And it takes that profit and distributes it to workers in the form of either better benefits or higher wages. So what's the role of the government in creating cooperative business in a place like Jackson. So taking your example, what's the role of the government in creating the movie theater and the construction company?
Well, on one hand, it's just the utilization of the bully pulpit from the mayor's office to promote it and insert that idea. On the other hand, it's the idea of incubator funds to help support and make the environment conducive for that, whether it be small business programs that lead to the development of that. And so that's what we're attempting. Regulations. In fact, I talked about the history of Fannie Lou Hamer, and historically you've seen a state government in Mississippi that has pushed against the cooperative business models. In fact, it was made illegal to incorporate a cooperative business in Mississippi. Now, as we know, you can be like many other entities and incorporate in another state, if you choose. But it's making certain that we assert the principles and the need for that that is really at the heart of what we're doing right now.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that you're doing, and so the idea would be, one, it would fill a need in Jackson, because if you don't have a movie theater, you'll create a movie theater, but you're also creating an economic model where there are jobs, and those jobs are locally based, and the people that work there own the company, right?
Absolutely, and it's also behind the idea of leveraging your position. So, I'm not even asserting that 100% of our economy has to be in this regard. But when we see redlining, when we see divestment in our community, then it leverages your position. If Jackson, which is a city that traditionally doesn't have a problem producing wealth, it has a problem maintaining wealth. And all of the money that happens to be made between 9 and 5 is out by 6. And so how do we leverage our position to make certain that investment stays home, that wealth stays home? When people go to the movies, for instance, they tend to enjoy eating before their movies. They may want to shop. And so when Jackson decides that it will fill its own voids, then some of the bedroom communities that have been able to thrive and build off of our population recognize that Jackson doesn't come out here quite as frequently. They don't make the trip. And so it's not even about a war between those neighboring communities, because they're doing what they should do. They're looking to build wealth in their community. We have to make certain that we identify that we're failing to do what we need to do and start filling our voids, making it thereby dangerous not to invest in our community.
Mm-hmm. And one of the ways in which you're also promoting a solidarity economy, in your words, is also through community-based budgeting. Can you talk a little bit about what is that and how it works in terms of having communities control more of the resources of the taxes they generate?
Well, community-based budgeting is not a novel concept to other parts of the country, and I think that your model for community-based budgeting should reflect, the unique demographics, needs, and concerns of your community. But we are in the process of going through an education stage of what it is. We had a democratic visioning committee of my transition team. And so that committee has expanded its work through our people's assemblies, which is another vehicle that we're using to communicate with the community and be held accountable by the community, where we're really educating what it looks like. And that's giving the community voice and speaking to where they want to see resources go and how you allocate portions of your budget towards the community, being able to ensure that instead of putting forth initiatives that really don't benefit the community, you're no longer scratching where people aren't itching. So that's what our idea is to give community opportunity to say, this is what we value, this is where we want our resources to be allocated to.
Right. So they have the ability to say where they want their tax dollars spent in their community on the things that they care about. And so the third major thing that you just touched upon it again are these people's assemblies. Mm-hmm. What are those and how do they work?
Well, the People's Assembly is a body that we initiated before I took office. It came under my father's direction when he was a city council person. And it's not a body that is run by the administration, and nor should it ever be. It has to be its own independent institution so that it is not swayed by government. And so at this time, though I'm a part of its initiation and its history, it is something that has to run and function on its own, but I have to be accountable to it as mayor. Accountable in the sense that we provide information as to the issues that the city is facing, the important things that the community should be tuned into, and at the same time learning from the community, hearing from the ground level of what people are experiencing, what they see a need for change in. And so it becomes an opportunity for better, increased engagement, but it also becomes a necessary pressure mechanism to make certain that I'm doing exactly what I need to do.
Right.
And so it's important.
And the People's Assembly works how? Like, how do people get into the People's Assembly, and how do they stay in it? Or
yeah. Well, the People's Assembly meets on a quarterly basis. It actually travels across the city to meet people where they are. It's in churches, it's in community centers, and everyone. If you're a citizen of Jackson, you have the right to be. It is your assembly. I don't own it as mayor, and if they change the dynamics of how it operates and functions, and that's their full prerogative to do so. And so we've been able to. The assembly itself has nominated candidates, and I think that we have to abandon our traditional models of waiting on someone to demonstrate political ambition, tell us what their vision for our world is. Instead, we have to draft candidates, work with those individuals who have demonstrated a commitment to the causes that we find important over time, and lead those people into candidacy so that we're not, stuck with the disappointment when people don't live up to our expectations. They don't live up to all of the things that they shared with us that they would do, when really our relationship is new to begin with.
And just a point of clarification, so the People's Assembly travels around the city. Who coordinates that?
So the Assembly itself nominates a coordinating committee, in fact.
So people who gather at these places can nominate people to lead the Assembly,
absolutely.
Right? Okay, that's
and so and that coordinating committee functions when the general body is not gathered in between meetings.
Got it. So you've laid out the way in which cooperatives are a different economic model. You have community-based budgeting for a different way to spend government resources in communities, and the People's Assembly, which is about democracy, right? So you have three different models. What's interesting about those is that those three innovations, as you say, have occurred in other places, but they're occurring all in Jackson at the same time, giving a new, vision for governance. And what's interesting about that is it's coming from a state which is very heavily Republican, which is very heavily poor. So we have these innovations at the local level from a place that, if you were to ask most Americans, wouldn't be the source of innovation. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how and why Jackson in these new innovations.
Well, I say that there's no more important place than Jackson. When you look at the historic deficits and the historic trauma that has been experienced in Mississippi, then what it demonstrates is if we can achieve progress right there in the belly of the beast, then it can be had anywhere. And so we feel that it is critical. But what we speak to, and I talk about a city that overwhelmingly voted on a progressive agenda. We won our campaign by 93%. What we speak to is a shared experience. And that shared experience is no matter whether you've traditionally aligned yourself with more conservative ideals or a more progressive ideal, that you live in a state that has always been at the bottom. No matter whether our country has experienced what has been characterized as great economic booms or busts, Mississippi has always been at the bottom. And so it is apparent to me that what we do locally is what is going to rescue us. And so we have to get out of the mode of doing the same things over and over and over again. I was talking with someone earlier today about this more progressive line of leadership or cohort of leaders stepping up and making certain that we don't necessarily correlate radical with reckless. I think that it is well thought out approaches to how we talk about the issues that we focus on, and really common sense approaches. Understanding that we're a lot smarter together than we are individually, that we all are seeing a system that hasn't necessarily gone wrong, but a system that is probably overperforming in the way that it was intended. When you see a country where the the wealthy have the decision-making power to dictate how our economy functions, then it stands to reason that they're becoming more wealthy, and we're seeing greater gaps in equity across the world and across our nation specifically. And so we need to seize control of that and make certain that we develop a system that works for, what we value.
Within that, I mean, it's a way to actually structure the change. I mean, what's also interesting is that your solutions actually demand that people can't just only reject and cast aspersion on the system. They actually have to participate, right? So you're saying, okay, well, if you don't like it, then you got to help us figure out what the budget is, and you have to, like, it's actually demanding more of people, which I think is an interesting way, and it's something that people who are progressive or radical aren't often challenged to do, right? Because it's about changing the system in a different way. How is it being received in Mississippi? I'm wondering, given the fact that you are in a red state, two very conservative senators, very conservative governor, conservative state legislature, what is their reaction to what's going on in Jackson? Are they making it harder for you to do your job? What is the environment to the change that you are putting forth?
Well, if I had to evaluate where we are and truly be reflective, I think that people have demonstrated that they believe that there's a certain level of authenticity to what we're talking about. It's a certain period of education that is going on. And so
you going to the leaders and saying, this is what this is actually about?
Absolutely. Going to the community. And I think that you have an experience that is gradually taking off. And so we have to keep working and make certain that we don't take a revolutionary elitist perspective. It's not for me to come to the community and say that I figured something out that no one else has figured out, and I have an understanding of what we're suffering from more than anyone else. But it's a dialogue, it's an exchange. And so we're collectively learning together. We're collectively pursuing this together and molding it into what our shared vision is. And so I think that it is a new concept, and so people are embracing that. And I find that most people are not necessarily afraid of change as they are afraid of loss. And so we have to share that this is not a proposition of losing the things that we value. It's about building on those things that we value and making certain that we create greater equity in the process.
Well, what does the governor think of what you're doing?
Well, the governor and I are, we're not necessarily ideologically aligned on many fronts, but I also believe in the concept of utilizing operational unity, where we can focus more on our common ends and objectives than our differences. And that has been demonstrated in our ability to keep our local school district under local control. One of the immediate challenges that I faced as mayor is, less than a month in, I was presented with a 700-page document from the state school superintendent saying that the city of Jackson was going to lose control of its local school district. And so it was all but the governor's signature away from being taken out of our local control. And so in conversations with the governor, I didn't focus on the fact that, I have a more progressive agenda than he may have. I didn't focus on whether I was radical and he was conservative. What I focused on was the fact that we both agreed that there was an opportunity to create a transformational district. I focused on the fact that we both could realize and recognize that state takeovers have not been successful in the state of Mississippi, nor have they been successful around the nation. And so he shared with me that he wished he had a third option. And so my team and I went back to the lab and created a third option to present to him. And so we were able to build on that. And so I think that we're positioned to create a far more transformational, a far more effective school district.
Okay, and maybe across the board in these other areas as well, you seem the similar engagement around education of what you're trying to do could possibly be helpful. I mean, that's good because as well, it doesn't mean that just because you're in a red state, there's no possibilities for you to create things differently. You have to have a different approach maybe. One of the ways in which you became mayor is through the tragic death of your father. your candidacy and then your assumption of office are in the wake of that. And I'm wondering what you think he would think of where you are today and what you've done.
Well, I would hope that he would be proud. My father often spoke to me about, entering into electoral politics. And he thought that it was more for me than it even was for him. At that time I was a bit defiant. It was not where
I want to go do something else.
I wanted to do something else. And I think that we have to view politics as a means to an end and not the end itself. And so I think that you can be effective and help community out more than just being in political, in a electoral space. And so I want to make certain that I emphasize that point. But the day my father died was the opportunity that I made the decision for myself that I would run. I think that it dawned on me that leadership must come less out of political ambition and more out of necessity. And I felt that I had the unique benefit to live in the household with my heroes, because both of my parents were equally powerful. And so there was something that I felt needed to be offered, and hopefully if they were around, that they would think that I'm making them proud.
Well, I think that's probably right.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate it. And I think that we'll continue to follow with great interest the progress of the ideas that you're setting forth, because if they gain traction and are effective, I think that they really will provide a roadmap, a new roadmap for the way in which we can structure governance and economy, which is what people want at this moment.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really want people to tune in to what's happening in Jackson, trying to change the world from where we stand.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us here on Free Speech Television, FSTV, at Netroots Nation, as we continue to talk to people about the innovations that are happening at all levels in the United States at this really critical moment. Stay tuned.